Writing is my favorite thing to do.
Have you heard about the Gateway to Publishing Conference and Convention? They'll have writing workshops, writing classes, and more. June 16th through 18th, 2017 at the Renaissance Airport Hotel in St. Louis, Missouri.
Cool! Where can I sign up?
Go right now to www.stlwritersguild.org and click on GatewayCon.
www.stlwritersguild.org and click on GatewayCon?
That's right. See you there.
Right Pack Radio, a podcast produced by Winding Trails Media for writers by writers.
Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack.
Hello and welcome back to Right Pack Radio. I am your host for today, Kathleen Kayembe, filling in for David, who I might have murdered and left in the other room, sputtering up his lungs. I write fantasy and horror and imaginative things, and I have a short story called You Will Always Have Family coming out in March in Nightmare Magazine. And with me today is...
My name is Jennifer Stolzer. I'm a children's book author and illustrator. My premier fantasy novel, Threadcaster, which I believe that this episode is going up on the 12th of March.
Who knows with the rearrangements?
Well, if it's coming out on the 12th of March, it means it's now available on Amazon, and you can buy and download it. If it's coming out before then, it'll be available on the 11th of March. And if you buy it on the 11th and send proof of your purchase to threadcaster@gmail.com with your mailing address, I will send you a prize pack. And if this comes out on the 12th, which is the day after that becomes valid, and you send me a letter to Threadcaster, that's THREADCASTER @gmail.com, and put in the body that you heard about it on Right Pack Radio, I'll still send you a prize pack.
Yay.
This isn't like valid forever though. How about let's say within the next couple days?
Alright.
Always email to be careful, whenever you hear this. Whatever.
Wait, this is 2017.
It is true. It is 2017. It won't be valid next year. Maybe I'll be putting out another book next year. We'll see.
I am George Soroy. I am the Vice President of the Missouri Writers Guild. Looking forward to seeing you all at the Missouri Writers Guild Conference in Columbia, Missouri at the Holiday Inn Executive Center, May 5th through the 7th. I write science fiction for the young adult reader. My young adult novels, Excelsior and Ever Upward, Part 2 of the Excelsior Journey, will be released through Aloris Publishing on May 1st and June 1st of this year. And the 5 separate books that make up the 5-part serial from Parts Unknown will also be coming out in the very near future. And I am currently hard at work narrating the audiobook for Argentum, the second book in the Pause series by Debbie Manber-Kupfer.
That's very exciting.
Very.
I like Debbie. She's a nice lady.
She is. Very nice.
My name is Chanel Etienne. I write all sorts of things, but namely science fiction and fantasy.
I'm Melanie Lucas. I am here.
Melanie Lucas, coughing into the microphone.
Yes, and if you hear coughing and it's nice and loud, that's me. And if you hear coughing from the other room, that's my dear husband, who I got sick. Kathleen didn't actually murder him.
It's not Kathleen's fault, it was Melanie's fault.
Don't expose my lies! Alright, we have a special guest. We have a special guest with us today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I am Lynn Cahoon. I am the writer of Cozy Mystery. I have two series out right now, the Tourist Trap series and the Cat Latimer series, which is a writer's retreat series. And I'll be starting a new Farm to Fork series that will release in 2018.
Ooh. So what's a Farm to Fork series?
It's still a cozy mystery, but it's set in my hometown of Idaho. Of course, I'm naming it something else and bringing all of the fun of living there with all of the farmer's market guy, and the guy. It's called, the first one's going to be called "Who Stole My Goat Cheese?" And the goat cheese provider is actually has a farm out on the Snake River, and there's a cave there, and the cave's really big into the story. But
I think that's a great segue into our topic for today. It seems like you took a lot of inspiration from your home and existing companies and businesses and locations, and today we are talking about inspiration. Inspiration, that thing all writers hope will strike, but that usually comes at an inopportune moment when you might not be able to write anything down.
Like when you're naked or in the shower.
Shower is a big one. Or when you're driving and you're not supposed to write things down with your hands.
Or when you are at work.
Yes.
That is a big one. That seems to be basically whenever you cannot commit yourself to actually sitting down and writing. That seems to be when the inspiration hits you the hardest.
Or in the middle of the night when you don't want to turn on the light to write anything down.
Yep.
Have you guys noticed any patterns in when inspiration usually strikes, other than not an opportune moment?
That's pretty much the main, the main thread here is inopportune moments.
Yeah. Whenever you can't really take advantage of it, that's when inspiration likes to strike.
Yeah.
I hear it happens during repetitive tasks, so like washing dishes and driving and showering. Your brain is kind of relaxed and focused on other things, and so your subconscious is like, hey, I got something for you.
That, I've heard that other places as well, that it's something to do with compartmentalizing your thoughts, activating the rest of your brain into doing stuff that you don't really have to think too hard about, so then your mind can wander easily without worrying, without having to pay too close attention. Like, it's hard to come up with inspiration for a book when you're really engrossed in a movie, but it's sometimes easy to come up with inspiration if you're watching a movie you've seen 110 times. What I like to do when I write is either put on a video that I've already seen or music that I know really, really well that I know gives me good, strong emotional feelings that I'm having a good time, but not necessarily new enough or interesting enough for me to be distracted from the world that's in my head instead of in the video.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably a little terrifying because I just realized that I get a lot of inspiration while I'm driving, and I'm like playing out these scenes in my head, and I'm like, I should probably be paying attention to the 18-wheeler that's coasting alongside me instead of
probably
XYZ character and how they're gonna make it off of this island before sunset. Oh God.
Mm-hmm. I can't judge you for that. I have stopped writing things by hand while on the highway, though. I use voice memo app on my phone and just record it and then put my phone back down.
I was actually just going to say that the voice memo, sound recorder, any sort of recording device that you would have, where you can just go ahead and throw in a couple of lines here and there. Basically, what you'd be doing is basically what Michael Keaton as Billy Blaze did in Night Shift. Is he would always have a little tape recorder with him, and he would always just throw out different ideas for all these random, crazy moments of inspiration that consistently hit him at all times throughout that movie.
I got the idea to put a recording device in my car from doctors who do dictation.
Go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah, for me, it's actually the ideas I'll deal with while I'm doing something else, but I won't actually be writing because the ideas I come up with are so great that when I write it down, that I look at them and I go, oh, I don't understand where I was going. So we were up at the cabin a couple weeks ago, and I was and I typed out a first scene on my phone, and it just I was able to send it to my Gmail and just transfer it right there. It was only 250 words, but it gave me that first scene, and I really knew where I was going after that.
Mm-hmm. Gmail and being able to email myself different scenes or different recordings has been very helpful in keeping everything in the same place. I also use Evernote a lot for when inspiration strikes on the go, because you can just make a note in Evernote and give it tags and make recordings in there, and it's pretty fabulous. So, George, you mentioned the worker in night shift.
Yes.
One of the things I wanted to talk about were stories of how authors that we admire got inspiration and what they did when they got it, how they recorded it, when it struck.
Well, like I can definitely say that I think let me see. Trying to think of like all the different creators out there that have really gotten their inspiration. I would say that probably one of the most famous, and definitely someone who's very well known in our community would be George Lucas, who was inspired by the serials of the 1940s, the 1930s and 40s, and the adventure serials of the 1940s during that time and everything that really prompted him to want to create something similar for a new generation, which prompted the eventual creation of Star Wars, and years later Indiana Jones. So it's definitely one of those things that really kind of like taps into your childhood, really. Like, just always kind of think about that. Like, what is it that really kind of drove you to pick up that pen and create and just say something along the lines of like, I want to do that when I get older. Like, so there's always something like, there's always some moment like that. With Lucas, it was that. And the funny thing is that, like, with me, it was Lucas. It was Lucas's creation. So it's that whole circle of life thing. That, people say that, people can have their, take their shots at Lucas and for the prequels, and, a lot of times deservedly so. But at the same time, it was his inspiration to create something and basically, make something brand new out of something very old that allowed so many different people in all walks of life to be inspired to do that same thing.
You reminded me of something I was going to bring up from what Jen said a little earlier. Octavia Butler got inspired to write some of her... she got inspired to be a writer from watching a bad movie. She saw this film and was like, I could do so much better than this. And that inspired her to start publishing her work, because she knew she could do better. And I think that's great. It's a story of how she, decided to be a writer, not necessarily for inspiring a single story, which I think are two different things. I bet we all have stories about, what inspired us to be a writer versus what inspired our current stories.
To dovetail off of where Octavia Butler got her inspiration.
We're dovetailing off Octavia Butler today.
One of the things, one of my all-time favorite stories about how a movie got created was, a group of 3 writers, Jerry Zucker, David Zucker, Jim Abrams, who had basically were looking for any sort of inspiration, and the best place where they got it was old commercials on late night television. So they basically recorded several hours of late night commercials that were that were from their hometown. I think it was like in Minnesota or something, but they were instead captivated by the late night movie that was being shown, which was this really lame airplane disaster movie called 0 Hour. And it was by watching that gave them the inspiration to, instead of take all these different commercial ideas and make parodies of them, they instead created a parody of 0 Hour, which became Airplane.
Really?
Yeah, and we several years ago, my wife and I actually took we got 0 Hour off of Netflix. We watched it, and it's basically Airplane played straight. Like, there are chunks of huge chunks of dialogue that they took from that, even shots that they took from it, character names that they took from it. The main character is Ted Stryker, who has to take over the airplane and everything when the entire crew winds up getting sick. It's...
Oh my God.
It is... When you watch that and then you watch Airplane, it's a brilliant, type of experience. The whole thing is like about, just watching it for like 3 hours long, and it's just a wonderful experience. And when you see that, it's just like it's a perfect example of how inspiration just finds its way to you at times. It will, like you can be looking in one direction for something, and then all of a sudden you'll be pulled over to something else completely.
I have to wonder about the legality of basically copy pasting from something that didn't realize it was.
But it's
fine.
because it's a parody.
It's
like
parody.
that. That's
a
what.
satire.
The answer is they can be sued, but if they choose to fight the lawsuit, they will probably the defense will probably win.
I had no idea Airplane was a parody of anything.
Oh,
I
yeah.
thought it was just a straight up comedy.
No.
But I knew it was a
a
satire.
parody. It's a parody satire of that style of disaster, specifically airplane disaster movies. Those things were really popular at the time.
Yeah,
and
in
I'm sure that
1970s,
Zero Hour
yeah.
was probably the absolute culmination of all of those cliches.
It was
So
actually
a great
like
jumping off point.
it's a
for
weird thing. It was
satire.
actually kind of ahead of its time because it came out, I want to say, like in the late 1950s, early 1960s, and then Airport, which is really what kind of kicked off that whole genre. I think came out in 1970, and that's what had like, that was that's when you have like all these different very well known actors basically like taking up every single seat in this particular airplane.
So, while we're talking about how people got inspired for how like more famous authors got inspired, I've been looking at Chanel every so often, just hoping she'll bring up Elizabeth Gilbert
Oh, jeez.
and her book Big Magic.
Oh, jeez. What? You bring it up. You brought it up.
So I'll bring up the TED Talk that she did, but you paid more attention to Big Magic than I did, and I think you'll tell it better. So Elizabeth Gilbert had an awesome TED Talk a few years ago where she talked about inspiration and how people would ask her, how do you feel knowing that Eat, Pray, Love is behind you? Like, probably your best-selling work ever is behind you. Like, from now on, you'll never be that successful.
What a mean
Wow.
thing to
Right,
ask.
what a terrible thing to say.
Pretty much. But, like, it was something that she had worried about for herself. Because when you get highly successful, you always have to wonder, how am I going to top that?
You mean the Harry Potter syndrome?
So Miss Gilbert, looks like it's all downhill from here. Just
Yeah, that's
How do you feel about
not
that?
very encouraging. But it did lead her to think about how inspiration worked in previous cultures. And she talked about muses and Greco-Roman culture and how people used to believe that you were inspired, you were given something by the gods, Chanel, and it didn't...
Chanel the God.
But your work, your work didn't come from you. You were kind of given it.
Muse, I think
You were
you're
a
talking
conduit
about.
for it, sort
Yes.
of. Basically, the way that she described it was that you were visited by the muse, and the muse sort of bestowed upon you the ability to create this work. You were literally kind of only the vessel that it chose to come through. It really, the way that she explained it was that it really took the pressure off of the artists themselves, because they had this knowledge or this way of thinking that, hey, this isn't me, this is a muse. So even if I don't make anything that's as great as this, it's because the muse didn't strike again. It's not because I'm a terrible artist, which is kind of the reverse of the way that we think about these things now. Whereas if it's like, oh God, I did Eat, Pray, Love, and I can't do anything like Eat, Pray, Love again, so I'm clearly a terrible author, and I should go sit in the corner and rock and cry. So, I really appreciated that because, especially like if you're like me and like you've written for a minute and then you took a long break and you're looking at the things you write now and the things that you wrote before and you're just like, oh God, I'll never get it back. It's this very comforting feeling of this sort of divine spark that she seems to think inhabits creative efforts. She also goes a bit into like other cultures, like not just with writing, but also with styles of dance or styles of other forms of art. She really spent a lot of time on it. Another thing that I really liked that she went into in Big Magic was the idea of being sort of struck by inspiration, quite literally. It would just kind of come on and tap you on the shoulder, and you guys were making in theory, making a contract, you and this muse, quote unquote, to make this creative piece happen. And if you decided to back out of that contract, the muse would leave. As in, you don't put forth the time, you don't put forth the effort, you back out on your end in some way. The muse has the ability and apparently the right to just pack up and say, deuces guys, it's been real. And suddenly the great idea that you had for this novel is no longer there, which I've had that happen before.
But it doesn't, but it goes to someone else.
Yes.
Why.
That is something that she said, is that her idea was that if you are not willing or able to take on this muse's project, the muse will pack up and go to someone else, kind of like your ex-girlfriend or boyfriend who's fed up with your nonsense and is going to go to Joe down the street. The muse will go to Joe down the street and say, hey, bud, do you want to take a nice little ride, and we're going to make a novel together. So, yeah, if you miss out on novel, neighbor Joe down the street could possibly get your novel because the muse was tired of waiting on you and decided to go somewhere else instead.
See, that sounds really scary.
It's a little terrifying when you put it that way, but that's one of the things that she is apparently a part of her creative mythos for her.
Well, and it also deals with the issue of the muse comes when you're sitting in the chair doing the work. I mean, so many times I'm asked, how do you get over writer's block? And I say, I don't believe in writer's block, because writer's block means I'm not setting my butt in that chair and writing crap. And if I'm not writing crap, I'll never get past the crap to get to the real word.
Actually, I just heard Nora Roberts say that exact same thing. When she guested on Wait, Don't Tell Me yesterday. They asked her about writer's block, and she pretty much said exactly what you just said, Lynn, that there's no such thing as writer's block. If you sit down and write crap, you're still writing. And the point is that you write it, and that's how she writes so many books, because she writes so many crap ton of books.
Once you get as big as her, they publish it even if it really is crap sometimes.
I'm not going to make any judgment calls on Nora Roberts.
Some of her stuff is really good and really well written. I'll say that.
To keep talking a little bit about the idea of the muse coming and going, I know that it's all about philosophy and what's the word I'm looking for? Philosophy and strategy, I suppose. You know, it makes you feel better to say, oh, well, this work will go to somebody else if I can't do it right now, or giving the muse the power over the creative side. If that helps you write, that's fine. That makes me feel a little uncomfortable because it sort of removes my ownership of the idea.
I see that.
Like, I've worked, Threadcaster's a great example. I pitched that earlier today and get you all to go buy it. I've been working on that for 11 years. And it's as much a part of me as my right hand is at this point. And I don't think that anyone could take that from me. It's been inside me for long enough, even when I wasn't working on it. It's 11 years old, not because I was writing it constantly for 11 years. It's 11 years old because I wrote a draft back in college and then scrapped everything, and then wrote another draft after I quit my job, and then scrapped everything, and then wrote the draft we have now. It's, I don't know, that's the part that makes me feel uncomfortable with that philosophy, is the idea that the work exists outside of my soul, because I feel like my soul is on the page right now.
I totally agree with that. And I've especially for long time works like that, like I've got one that I've been working on for a similarly long period of time, and it's like it is literally a part of your spirit that is there in that story. I think the part that, this is my interpretation of what she said, was that I think she was trying to get out of the whole, tortured artist mentality, where that if you are an artist, you have to sort of have this self-depreciating I'm going to hurt myself to make this work better. And if I have to hurt myself to keep providing this quality of work that Eat, Pray, Love has given the world, then I'm going to do that. She, I think, especially in a TED Talk, remind me if I'm thinking about it wrong, that she really was not a fan of the idea of the tortured artist mentality. And that's why she was trying to sort of take a little bit of the flack off of the artist persona and like sort of give a more broader sense of where this inspiration can come from, so you don't have to take the brunt of it. The artist itself doesn't have to take the brunt of their failure.
I think that's attacking the wrong end of that argument.
Yeah,
what they need to do is get rid, fight against the perception that all artists are tortured and all artists are starving and all artists are in pain.
And alcoholics and addicted to
Yeah,
drugs.
like you don't need Ernest Hemingway, you don't need to be drunk to write, but you've convinced yourself that you do and it's killing you. That's not the truth. That is a stereotype. That is a damaging stereotype to all artists, including and especially musicians and writers. But, with examples like Van Gogh, being drugged and or crazy is also an art, a fine art philosophy as well. And that's, the fact is that every human being has potential inside of them. And if you can't work right now, it doesn't make you less of an artist. It makes you as much, if not more, of a human.
Can I offer a slightly different example of the philosophies that are of similar philosophies? Julia Cameron wrote The Artist's Way, and she does a lot in that book to make sure that people are able to create and do so in a way that is healthy and that isn't harmful to themselves in the long run. So she does a lot to make the reader realize that creativity is a natural part of every human being. And one of the things that she does, that she says to help people make writing easier on their, easier mentally, is don't think something up, take something down. It changes the direction of flow, so it's less stressful because you don't have to create something crazy amazing. You just have to listen for what's there and write it down. So that's less work that the writer has to do. And it doesn't mean that, the writer isn't putting work into making sure what they put down is good. It just means you don't have to try so hard. You are naturally going to be able to do this. Madeleine L'Engle has a kind of similar way of thinking about stories. She, in the book Herself, which is full of small little interview segments that she's done, she talks about wanting to be like Mary when Mary was told by the angel in Christian religion that she was going to have this baby. And Mary said, yes, okay. Mary said, yes, okay. And then she did her thing to make it happen, as far as being a good mom and all that stuff. So Madeleine L'Engle's philosophy was, I want to be like Mary. When a story comes to me and says, I want you to give birth to me, I say yes, and I do my part to make it happen. So is the story going to work if I don't work at it? No. But I will do my best to put down this story as faithfully as I receive it. And that to me is a huge weight off of my shoulders. I get to think the story is already there. I just have to put it on the page as closely as it is in its existence wherever as I can. The better I am as a writer, the more faithfully I'll be able to tell this story the way it needs to be told. So that is my job. But I don't have to think things up so much as just listen for what's there.
Yeah, definitely to play off of what's been said by all three of you in this segment. One of the things that we definitely need to do is just kind of chuck out all of the different negative stereotypes that are for some reason or another linked with writers. Just saying oh, I'm a writer, so naturally I procrastinate. This is no, you procrastinate because you're procrastinating. That has nothing to do with you being a writer. What you need to do is you need to do what Lynn was saying. Just sit down, commit yourself to writing as much crap as possible, and all of a sudden everything will start flowing the way that it should. It's something that it's a muscle. That's really what it is. You are sitting down at your desk, even though it may be the most sedentary thing. You are going to the gym at that point. You are getting yourself in a position where you can do your very best work, and the only way that you can do that is to sit down and do it. And that's one thing that that's where the procrastinating doesn't come into play. The drinking doesn't come into play. All this stuff about like waiting for inspiration and everything. Inspiration will hit at its time. What you have to do is make sure that you're ready for it when it happens.
Octavia Butler said in one of her essays in Bloodchild that forget inspiration. Persistence is what will get you there. If you're writing every day, the inspiration will come. But if you're not, you could be waiting forever to get inspired. And I found that habit was very helpful for getting inspiration. When I was in high school, there was a free period that I had where I would always write for this online community. I would write a short during that free period and then go about my day. And I found after a few days of doing that, I was immediately inspired when the bell rang to sit down and start writing something. So inspiration showed up because I was already showing up. And it took a few days for the habit to kick in, but once I did, inspiration was pretty reliable.
So not to kind of change the subject, but I guess my question would be, so does anybody have any sort of a go-to inspiration store piles that, like, if I do, for example, if I find a song that I am really jiving with, I will sometimes be able to put it on repeat and just let a story just kind of come tumbling out. Like, does anyone have that kind of stockpile of inspiration?
Yes, I basically make my own soundtracks for the whatever project I'm working on. I can go through at least half of my film score collection, and I can point to at least one song on each album and say, like, this inspired this scene, this inspired that scene. And it'll be free flowing. It's never going to be like fully locked in until the book itself is locked in. But the different pieces of music here and there and everything will get me going to the point where I can see the scene play out in my head like if it's a movie. And it'll have like a certain shot or anything that I feel will be just a perfect like cinematic moment. I can even take a little piece of music and make my own trailer in my head. Just one of the really great pieces that I really love is it's a piece called Trinity by James Dooley. And it's because of that piece. It was music that was used in one of the trailers for Spider-Man 3. And very excellent, very very powerful piece of music and everything. And it actually inspired the trailer to the movie adaptation of the 11th story in this series that is going through my head. By the way, I just finished number 2. So that's a ways to go, but I already know what the trailer for part 11 is going to look like. So because of that music.
Awesome. Speaking of that, it's a little bit off topic, but just wondering if that might get in the way further down the road, because book trailers actually are a real thing. Mm-hmm. So since you already have music in your head, does that ever interfere because you can't use the music you're thinking of because of costs?
Not always. Not like it'll help. I will as soon as I have the music down and everything, I've made my peace with the fact that it's not going to be that, but I know that it's going to be. If it's going to be anything like if by some miracle Excelsior winds up getting picked up for a film adaptation, which I think it should, but that's just me. I can basically just hand the director or editor or anything like a disc and just say like, this was the temp track, this is the temp score that I was doing while I was coming up with it. And for all I know, if the director chooses to actually kind of take my input, obviously they don't have to, but if they wanted to, they could take that, hand it off to their composer and say like, this is what he had in mind for this scene, this scene, this scene, and this scene down the road. And they could wind up composing something that is similar to that without being that.
My little well of inspiration is not Well, I do like to work with sound and voices and things, but it's not so much a soundtrack or whatever as it is places. I go somewhere to write. Or I go somewhere to write even if it's in my own house. Like, my inspiration places are coffee shops. Specifically, I have a couple around St. Louis I like to go to. It doesn't necessarily have to be those, though. I could go to any coffee shop. It's the idea of I am going to writing, and I'm going to sit at writing. The spot in my house that is good for writing is after dark, in front of either the fireplace or the TV with most of the lights down and everyone's asleep. When it becomes writing time, it's quiet writing time. The rest of my household has gone to bed, and I'm the only one in the entire universe awake.
Nice.
Those are my places and times for writing. And depending on what I'm working on or what I'm listening to at the time or just how I feel is what I put on in the background of, I'm watching people play video games, or I'm watching a movie that I've got memorized already, or I'm listening to music. It's that all changes, but if I'm at writing, that's where I'm at.
Going to write-ins and having a set writing time and place is also wonderful for me. I find it interesting things that inspire me to write versus the sorts of things that inspire a story. So like cafes, certain music, or complete silence are great for me for writing. But things that have inspired stories are like a car accident, or the gorgers on trees, or like witches in Congo. Those are things that have all inspired stories for me. And writing prompts, I do those, and they are so inspiring. And I don't have to write the entire story, but it kind of warms up my writing muscles, so to speak.
Like, I guess I'm a little weird. Lot of
Welcome to the club.
You're here, so
Yay! So my one of the things that I kind of have the luxury of pulling on for inspiration is my dreams. I have really kind of whacked out and vivid and kind of crazy dreams that Kathleen tends to hear more often than not.
They're awesome.
So a lot of the times I'll wake up and I'll be incredibly confused as to what the hell just happened inside my head, and I will have to write it down, not just for the sake of like keeping a dream journal, which is pretty awesome. You should do it. It's literally, okay, I am in this place, and this extraordinary sense of these extraordinary circumstances happened that I have to try and fill in with my waking mind, because that's how dreams work. And by trying to fill in the missing pieces that I don't remember or weren't given in the dream, I've literally kind of created this whole little plot bubble for myself. And I really kind of love that. It's really fun because it's one of those things that I can kind of tweak, or I can be exactly true to the dream. It's a fun thing for me. Another thing that I tend to enjoy is customer service. If you've ever worked in customer service, you get the best ideas for characters. It's so wonderful. Like, even just people's names. Like, I'll hear somebody's name and I'm just like, oh, they're simply that kind of person. Mm-hmm. Like, who on earth would name their child Apollo? I think that is a fabulous idea for a character, because only a certain person would be named Apollo, and then only a certain person will be happy about it. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the way that I work.
Yeah, people watching can be really good for that. Lynn, you had something to say?
Yeah, I do. I think I'm probably the boringest person on the panel, because I have another job like a lot of you, and so I have so little time to get the words in that I just need to go and sit down and write. So I don't listen to music, because then I start singing, or I don't. I might have some noise in the background, but that's about it. But as far as grabbing inspiration, I have a folder in my email that's called Mystery, and there's been so many murders and disappearances and interesting things around the Missouri area that I'm just kind of moving them all together, and someday there'll be some kind of story about it, but I grab, I'm a magpie, so I grab little pieces, and as soon as I see my pattern, that's when I know I have a story. But until I have the pattern, it's just random noise.
Mm-hmm.
So.
A pattern? Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I'm a little confused.
For me, I have to see how things will fit together. One of my books is called Murder on Wheels, and I was really focused on it's in South Code, which is a little California town, and I was really focused on what would happen if the food truck came in, and then we started doing this here thing called geocaching, where you go and you find things.
Yeah.
And then I had this guy that was in the Army during Vietnam and his story. And I wanted all three of these things in the book, but I didn't know what the pattern was going to be around it yet. So I had to, until I had the three where I went, yeah, they could do this and they could do that. Once I had that three, it pulls it together.
I was curious, actually. I'm glad you brought up how that story was what it was inspired by. I'm curious about how, what's inspired stories that you guys are currently writing. I want to know what inspired Threadcaster, for example. And I want to know if A Crazy Dream is what inspired the librarian story that Miss Chanel is writing right now.
Well, Threadcaster it was a combination of things that sort of worked together. So let's call it divine inspiration, because they were completely random ideas that one day I was like, oh, these would work. I had an image in my head because I was in college at the time, and I went in for animation. I went to college for animation, but you don't actually do any animation the first year you're there. You do all the prep work, like taking mass comm and intro to video and intro to audio and all sorts of things like that. So I had a lot of drawing time in classes, and I had this vision of a girl looking at the camera with water pouring out of her eyes, but no emotion. Like, she was constantly crying, but she wasn't actually sad. And I'm like, it's like she's filling up with water and it's just coming out. That was what I was trying to communicate in this picture. So I drew the picture, which is on my wall right now, because it was the first concept for Threadcaster, because that was kind of where the idea of the curses came from. There's a whole group of people in the book that are filling up with water, and they constantly cry and drool and sweat because there's water in them and it's just coming out all the time. And I translated that into the three other elements. There are fire curses, and they're filling up with fire, and there's fire coming out of them all the time, and they're burned and gross. And one of the main characters, there's characters from each of these, but Peter's pretty much the de facto second main character in the book. Kat and Peter are the two leads, and he's filling up with earth, and that was inspired by, the Elephant Man and Elephantitis. There's a skeleton on display at the Mutter Museum of Maladies in Philadelphia. His name's Henry. I don't remember what his last name is. I'm sorry, Henry. But he's a skeleton, and he's on display, and his skeleton's on display because his soft tissues were turning to bone. And his story directly inspired Peter's illness, so I made sure when I went to visit the Mutter Museum to sneak a pic of him, because it was pretty much Peter's dad. So there was that curse idea. I thought that was really cool, and I've always liked playing with string. I had a Cat's Cradle instructional booklet when I was a little kid, and I would take it with me on car trips, because you can only pack so much on car trips. So I would keep my Cat's Cradle string, and I would try to do the instructions in the book and get Olivia, my younger sister, to do Cat's Cradle and pass the string back and forth. So I just happened to have my string just around, and I remember walking up the hall and doing Jacob's Ladder, because I can do Jacob's Ladder without looking. And it's one of those things that's just like, I want something to do with my hands, because I'm fidgety, I'm an artist, I like to draw with pencil, and if I don't have pencil, then my hands need to do something. So I was doing string, and I was actually walking down the hall toward the bathroom, And when I got into the bathroom, I looked in the mirror and I threw the string and I went, "Yeah!" Like I was casting a Kamehameha beam. And I said, that would be really cool if you could cast magic using string like that. And that idea, that moment, plus this image I already had in my head of these curses, said, well, these could exist in the same universe. And that was how Threadcaster started.
Sweet. Nice. So to answer your story, Kathleen, yes, the librarian story did start out as a dream. I honestly don't remember much about it. It's just literally two people and an old dusty kind of attic type space, and it's all soft indirect sunlight and sepia colors and like little sprinkles of dust wafting in on indirect air currents, and like this really bizarre sense of sadness and not being able to fix something that wasn't your fault, but you felt like you needed to be able to right this wrong, and someone kind of trying to guide you through that sort of pain. And like that was like this really, like I said, I had no sort of no instinct of backstory. I just had this feeling in this dream and these two people, and that's all I had for Natalie's story, the librarian story. Kayla's story, also kind of part of it came from a dream. Like I mentioned earlier, something about an island. So in my hometown, we're right on the water, and we have barrier islands. And one of the barrier islands has, it's uninhabited, but it has an old fort from, I think, the War of 1812, that you can go and tour. But the boats have to be gone by sundown, and everyone has to be off the island by sundown. And I had this dream that there was a bridge that stretched from the mainland onto this island. And once you were on the island, everyone had to be off the island. And if you were still on the island after sunset, you were stuck. You could, like, the bridge literally shut down. If you were not back on the mainland, you were stuck there, and terrible, awful things would happen. Like, I had no idea what the terrible, awful things were, but I just remember being the sun setting and being able to see the last little slivers of light from the sun, and still being stuck on the bridge and not being able to get back to the mainland, and just looking back and be like, oh crap. So yeah, like my dreams are a really big source of inspiration for me.
I find it fascinating what inspires a story versus what keeps you inspired. So when I mentioned car accident earlier, Jinx, the story that is my Threadcaster.
I'm still waiting for it. You gotta keep writing it.
I want some of this.
Jinx was inspired by indentured servitude after a car accident. I had the car accident. It was definitely mine. And I was definitely wigged out, but also inspired by this situation. But all that I had written of Jinx initially from the car accident inspiration is gone. Everything that has come since has been other things that inspired me, and I was like, this will work in the story. This will work in the story. Demons are terrifying. This will work for these people in the story. Magic is awesome. This is definitely going in. This would be an awesome spell.
Actually, if I can talk.
I don't know, can you?
I'm not sure. But speaking of that, the story I am very slowly, due to everything else, including illness that's going on right now, working on, started as, it kind of morphed on me, because it started up very, trying to remember what inspired it, because I don't remember initially.
It can be hard.
Yeah, but again, the point is, things keep changing, and changing, and changing, and at some point I realized, it's like, wait a minute, there are vampires in this. I didn't realize that. All of a sudden I'm writing a vampire novel, and that's not what I started out doing.
I think it's great, though, that we can be inspired by things, and then the story takes us in an unfamiliar and unexpected direction. I always tell people, like, our subconsciouses are smarter than we are. Like, they know where we're going, even when we don't. So just start writing the story, and the rest will come out if you trust it enough to follow.
I will say, for actual concrete things, I am being, as far as I can be, inspired by, like, a lot inspired by, like, 1950s style technology, even though the story takes place modern day.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
When I was in grade school, my friends and I would basically, we were all fans of the same things. We were fans of Star Wars. We were fans of Voltron. We were fans of Transformers, G.I. Joe, like, you know, everything that a boy growing up in the 1980s, you know, like, that it was just required. You know, like, you were just going to love these things. Just like, here you go. Just don't even fight it. Enjoy. And so my friends and I, basically, we just started writing and, you know, mainly drawing just our own characters that were based on that, kind of like our own little universe. And after a very short period of time, I went to a different school and kind of lost contact with everyone. So I kept those characters with me, and I kept on just kind of picking at them and giving them much better personalities, much more broad, you know, like, much better characteristics, to the point where I could no longer draw them. I just had to write about them. And in about right after my sophomore year of high school, that was my last time I had to go to summer school, because I was, you know, definitely fitting that underachiever mold. But in my sophomore year of high school, it really kind of bottomed out to the point where I had to retake English. Yes, the writer, having to retake English.
You're just so used to breaking rules.
I am. So,
It just shows that retaking did very well.
It did very well, because I had a much better teacher the second time around. Went from failing it during the regular school year to getting an A during summer school. And it was during that time when I was just kind of picking around the idea of just like, I want to create somebody new to kind of put into this universe. And, you know, we were talking about, you know, like, myths. We were talking about King Arthur, and I was just like, I want this guy to, you know, have like a real kind of legendary quality. And we watched the PG version of the 1981 John Borman film Excalibur. Which I absolutely love. Absolutely love this.
High school too.
Yeah.
That was the one shown on network TV.
They must have done like just like a PG edit just to say, like, you know, this is so that the kids can watch it. And
no, I think what happened is it was the version shown on network TV during prime time.
Yeah. So anyway, like, watching that, I was just like, okay, you know, this character is going to have elements of King Arthur. He is going to have a sword. He is going to come, and then I put in my own elements, like, he's going to come from a different planet and everything, and he's going to be the creator of this particular, you know, planet. And so I used elements of King Arthur, Jesus Christ, and Optimus Prime. That was my trifecta that went into this character.
It's
quite a trifecta.
Awesome.
Yes.
That sounds like something you tell a Hollywood producer. I've got this great character. He's a mix of, oh my goodness.
Optimus Prime,
Jesus Christ, King Arthur, and Optimus Prime. Yes. And so,
the good father, the good shepherd, and the once and future king.
Pretty much, yeah. And the one who will light our darkest hour. So, yes. And so,
multiple characters
do that, yeah. And so I just kept on, you know, like, kind of picking away at this character. I knew there was something special about him. And in 2007, when I got the book No Plot, No Problem, I decided that after 16 years of kicking around this character, and I was just like, okay, I'm finally going to write his origin story, and I'm going to, you know, kick off this entire universe, and it's going to start with you. And I literally just kind of pointed him out of the crowd, just like, you are going to be my first trilogy. And so by the time I finished the book, it was, and, you know, like, released it and everything, it was 18 years after I created the character. By the time it was done relaunched through Rocking Horse Publishing, it was 21 years since, and now it's going to be 25 years. This in 2017, and so it's just
you need
like,
to have an event.
I really do. You know, like, I definitely do. You know, and so yeah, and that was just something that, you know, that I always really kind of like. I just knew he was going to be special. And as I grew up, there were different elements that inspired other characters along the way. There was one major one would be Frank Langella as Skeletor in 1987's Masters of the Universe. He is, he became the template for my main bad guy, Nocturar. And that's something that I always would love to tell Frank Langella, because he still stands by Skeletor as being one of his favorite roles. So,
well, who wouldn't
more power
love
to him.
Skeletor?
Exactly.
So that makes me want to bring up something that has always served as a source of inspiration for me, and inspires me to write both. Fan fiction. Fan fiction is a great way to explore, and fan communities are really inspiring to me. And I think with our last few minutes, we should kind of talk about how you create inspiration for yourself, like how you get yourself inspired to write, because there are certain things that for me will always inspire me. Like reading fan fiction makes me want to write fan fiction, and doing asking what if is very helpful for generating ideas, and brainstorming and free writing very helpful, and somehow something always pops up when I do that that's inspiring or that ties into a story.
Speaking of inspiration, are you talking about inspiring you to write your own work, or inspiring you to write fan fiction?
To write your own work.
Okay.
Fan fiction for me inspires me to write fan fiction, but then I also carry that into writing original things, because fan fiction will not allow me to do all the things that I want, but my own characters do. So what do you guys do when you need, writing inspiration to kind of get going?
For me, the one thing that I really love to do is I'm a sucker for special features on a DVD. So I love hearing the filmmaker or writer or screenwriter or original author or whatever talk about how they got started, what it was that really kind of got their seed planted, and what led them down this road to where they were talking about this movie years after the fact, where they are just kind of reflecting on that awesome time when they were working on it, when they realized they had something. That's something that I really love watching. Like, one of my all-time favorites will be Snowball Effect, which is on the Clerks 10 documentary. The 10th anniversary DVD for Clerks, and which also carried itself over to all the other editions that have come after that. That's the thing that really gets me going. It's just like hearing other people talk about like how they did it, and it's just like, I can do it too. So let's I want to be right there. So let's go ahead and do that.
Lynn?
Yeah, I think I agree with that, but for me, it's watching videos of Stephen King, because when I was growing up, he was the writer I wanted to be, and I never thought I could do that. So watching him talk about his process and what happened to him over the years, and obviously I love on writing, but he's also one of those that says it's so depressing to be talking to people and hearing that his most important book was The Stand. And it's like, because that brought up a whole generation of people, and it made us think of things differently. It was the first Walking Dead. They were alive.
Yeah. I can actually, Lynn, I'm not sure if you've ever heard this, but on the special edition DVD of The Stand, the ABC miniseries, they have an audio commentary with cast and crew where they're talking about that, and like Stephen King is very prominent on that track. Very inspiring.
Plus, Stephen King doesn't really care what anyone thinks. Yeah. Only himself and his wife, and then he's his publisher, I guess. But at this point, they just sort of given up on trying to corral him. He's one of those free spirits. I really respect him for that. And he doesn't care if he's writing about killer toasters today. He wanted to write about killer toasters. I mean, Dreamcatcher, he wanted to write a story that would do for the toilet what Psycho did for the shower.
I read Dreamcatcher and I don't remember that.
I saw the movie and I do. I think that's a really important point to end on, actually. When you stop caring so much about what other people think and just do what interests you, inspiration will work for you. You'll be inspired to write things that maybe will never sell, but that's okay. You're letting your mind play. And the more that you do that, the more inspiration will be drawn to you in the same way that, you know, the more you exercise, the healthier you get, or the more you practice, the better pianist you'll become and the closer you will get to Carnegie Hall. Any final thoughts? All right, well, thank you guys for listening. This has been Right Pack Radio, and we hope you have a great week writing. See you next week.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
It was fun. Took a while to get all put together, but
Yeah, it would have been easier if I hadn't murdered David, though.
Did you know that Right Pack Radio has an international audience? How would you like to reach that audience in regards to your books, your book services, your author services, or more? Go to www.windingtrailsmedia.com and look under advertising for more information. If you don't have a script, that's not a problem. We will be happy to work with you. Once again, go to www.windingtrailsmedia.com for more information.
The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her.